yeah. But I have to talk about art because it's what I do. As an art director and consultant, I work with galleries, dealers, private collectors, and I work with artists. I've curated, I've written articles about art for art magazines, and I've even produced a documentary film about art. So I spend a lot of time navigating the art world, and to be completely honest with you, at times I feel incredibly terrified and frustrated as hell because it's an industry that is built on exclusivity, and it caters primarily to those with vested interests. And so I understand the hesitancy around discussing art, especially for those who aren't affiliated with the art world. I know experiencing museums and galleries can be intimidating, combined with the fact that what dictates good and bad art can sometimes just feel arbitrary. But art shouldn't be this exclusive experience, because art can be incredibly powerful, and it can inspire, and it can even save lives. And I know this because it saved my life when I was an 11-year-old kid and I had just emigrated to the United States. You see, I grew up in a very, very small town 2 hours south of Budapest, and back then, Hungary was going through a breakup with communism. So I grew up in a communist culture, and I didn't experience commercialization or a capitalist consumerist culture until I had come to the States, and I was 11 years old. And you know, the two cultures are so completely opposite of one another, I began to disassociate. And what saved me was seeing graffiti. Graffiti was the only similarity I saw between Eastern Europe and the United States, so it became the glue of visual familiarity. And it's how I came to assimilate, and it's how I eventually fell in love with the United States, which, by the way, is the greatest country in the world. So, yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, aside from graffiti and street art helping me get through culture shock, it plays a much larger role. Graffiti came onto the scene in the 60s, and like true art, it pushed the establishment, it criticized, and it was an articulation of cultural presence. And today, we now have this great generation of artists still carrying the movement, and it's the graffiti and street art generation. And these are incredibly talented artists who have cultivated themselves stylistically from the streets and taken their art into the studio. But even though they are internationally recognized with museum and gallery exhibits, they still paint in the streets among and for the public. And they understand the value of public art and the power it presents and how it can inspire. And this is why my colleague Brian Greif and I founded the Nashville Nashville Walls Project, I'm sorry. And over the past year, I have had the honor of coordinating 10 public murals in Nashville. And these artists are, you know, they travel the world and they immerse themselves in the culture, like Above from Berlin, who paints, you know, with his moniker in mind. And, you know, these artists paint murals for the pure aesthetic beauty. And because they love to travel and immerse themselves into the local culture, they will paint murals that pay tribute to the city. For example, Mike Shine, who painted Hank Williams and Chuck Berry on the side of a recording studio on Music Row. And Roan from Australia, who paints these incredible portraits. And Curiat from Mexico, who's an abstract painter. And Adele Renault from Amsterdam. And Neil Schumann, who is the inceptive force behind Graffiti, painted Johnny Cash lyrics on the corner of this parking garage. And this wonderful collaboration between Mars One and Kiryat, who, by the way, were huge fans of each other's works, and they just happened to be in Nashville at the same time. And they got to collaborate on this wall together. And a great thing about these artists is that they set out to paint murals that raise awareness. For example, Louis Massai from Britain, he painted the North American flying squirrel that is native to Nashville or Tennessee, and unfortunately they're going extinct. And the Haircoop mural, which has become an incredible platform for animal rights. The local animal shelter now takes these pups to the murals and takes their portraits. And Kosh, Elliot, yeah, these pups were all long-term residents, and they have since found their forever homes. That's my personal favorite. In working with these international artists, we've also been able to highlight the local talent in Nashville. Nashville has some incredibly talented street artists like Herb Williams and Chris Zidek and Emily Miller and Brandon Donahue and Sam Dunson. And they all collaborated with the international artists, and then they were also able to paint a local mural. So the completion of these murals is a success story on behalf of the Nashville community, because it takes a community of people to bring these murals to life. You know, people from all professional backgrounds came by on their lunch breaks to see if they can volunteer and help. Some people brought lawn chairs, other people just laid on the ground all day. Yeah, but everyone was there and everyone was interacting with the artists. You know, they would take breaks from painting the murals and they would come and hang out with all the locals. And every single day at these murals, it felt like a block party. You know, everyone worked incredibly hard, but at the end of the day, everyone had a blast. And that's actually my dad. Yeah, he came to Nashville, and I think it, you know, his reaction just summed up the way it changes pedestrian life. You know, these murals are huge, so they are peripherally dominant. So they engage, you know, pedestrians. You know, they distract people from their phones. It completely, you know, slows the pace down, and you know, there are these groups of strangers having a collective moment reacting to these murals. And these murals are great for, you know, meeting up. People can use them to, you know, specify locations. They plan group activities like bike tours and school field trips around these murals. And, you know, this brings me to my most important point. These murals, this public art, redefines public space. You know, it creates an environment for all ages to experience the real world that isn't explicitly defined by subliminal ad targeting and billboards. And it engages the public. You know, when you go into a gallery and see art, that art is entitled to be there. So a lot of people feel like their opinion about the art is limited. But in public, where you walk your dog, the square you walk to take your lunch, that's fair game. You can love it, you can hate it. The point is that you are engaged with the art. And this is how I know I've done my job properly. After the completion of the Haircoop mural, I went up to the 26th floor of the high-rise right across from it to take photos. And it was after hours. Everyone had gone home except for one lady. And she had this great view, right next to the window, and she saw the entire mural being painted. So I asked her what she thought about the mural, and she was a little bit hesitant about answering. So I pushed because I wanted to hear her opinion. I wanted to know what she felt about this specific mural. And after, a few moments, she finally turned to me and said, I love the dog. The dog is great. Nothing wrong with the dog. But the little girl, she kind of creeps me out. Yeah. Now, this moment was great for two reasons. The first one being that little girl's face was, in fact, modeled after mine. Yeah. I'm not even joking. This is great. And the second reason was that she was engaging actively and confidently in art. And that's why I do what I do. I want to make art accessible. I want it to impact your day-to-day lives. And I want everyone to have access to the inspiration that it can instill. When you navigate in the city, in the public space, you can experience it with the beauty of street art. And that is an idea worth spray painting. Thanks.